I didn't know loving him would cost me everything. Until the night the rain refused to stop. Emma Carter pulled her thin jacket tighter as cold water soaked through the fabric, dripping down her spine like a warning she couldn't quite understand. The neon lights of the street flickering against puddles that reflected a life she was barely holding together. $20 in her pocket, 3 missed rent notices on her phone, and nowhere left to go by morning. She kept walking because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant breaking. Then she saw him, a figure standing just beyond. The streetlight, too still, too composed for a man caught in a storm like this. His black coat untouched by the wind, his presence quiet but heavy, like the air itself bent around him. Emma hesitated, her instincts whispering something was wrong. But she had spent her whole life ignoring fear when someone needed help. "Hey," she called out, her voice softer than the rain. "Are you okay?" He didn't answer at first, just turned his head slightly, and when his eyes met hers, everything inside her went silent. Pale, impossibly pale, like frost under moonlight, ancient in a way she couldn't explain. She should have walked away, she knew that, but instead she stepped closer. "You're hurt," she said, noticing the dark stain along his sleeve, her hands trembling as she reached out. The moment her fingers brushed his skin, she gasped. Cold, not just cold like winter, but something deeper, something that didn't belong to the living world. He inhaled sharply, as if her touch had startled him more than it should have. "Why?" His voice was low, controlled, but edged with something dangerous. "Why would you do that?" Emma swallowed, her heart pounding against her ribs. "Because you look like you need help," she said simply. The man stared at her, really stared this time, as if searching for something hidden beneath her words, something he hadn't seen in centuries. For a moment, the storm seemed to quiet, the noise fading into the background as his gaze locked onto hers. "You shouldn't be here," he murmured. "Neither should you," she replied before she could stop herself, and for the briefest second, something flickered in his expression, something almost human. Then the sound came. Engines, smooth and controlled, slicing through the rain. Emma turned as 2 black SUVs rolled to a stop at the curb, doors opening in perfect sync, figures stepping out with a precision that felt rehearsed, unnatural. They moved quickly, surrounding them without chaos, without hesitation. One of them stepped forward, head bowed slightly. "My king, we've been searching everywhere." Emma froze. The word echoed in her mind. Heavy, impossible. "King." Slowly, she turned back to the man, her breath catching as his eyes shifted, the pale gray deepening, glowing faintly beneath the storm's dim light. "You didn't tell me," she whispered. "You didn't ask," he replied, his voice softer now, but no less commanding. She stepped back instinctively, her pulse racing, but his gaze followed her, unwavering. "What are you?" she asked, barely able to form the words. He took one step closer, and the space between them felt charged, electric. "Someone you should forget," he said quietly. Emma shook her head, something stubborn rising in her chest despite the fear curling around her. "I can't," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "Not after." She glanced down at her hand, and that's when she saw it. A faint glow beneath her skin, a delicate pattern forming where she had touched him, pulsing softly like a heartbeat that wasn't her own. The man, no, the king, followed her gaze, and for the first time, something like concern crossed his face. "That's not possible," he murmured. The rain fell harder, louder, but Emma barely felt it now. "What is it?" she asked, her voice trembling. He looked back at her, those ancient eyes holding something darker now, something inevitable. "It means," he said slowly, "your life just changed forever." The glow did not fade. It grew stronger, pulsing beneath Emma Carter's skin like something alive, something aware, and with every heartbeat it felt less like her own. She stared at her hand, breath unsteady, the faint golden lines shifting into a pattern too precise to be random. "What did you do to me?" she whispered, her voice caught somewhere between fear and disbelief. The man in front of her did not answer immediately, his gaze fixed on the mark as if it defied everything he understood. Rain traced down his face, but he did not blink, did not move, as though time itself had paused around this moment. "I did nothing," he said finally, quieter now, but heavier. "That mark should not exist." Emma shook her head, stepping back. Again, her shoes splashing in shallow water. You said my life changed. That does not explain anything. The figures around them remained still, watching, their presence controlled and silent. But there was tension in the way they held themselves, as if waiting for a command that had not yet been given. Get in the car. One of them said carefully, not to Emma, but to him. Now is not the time. Another added under his breath. Emma's eyes flickered between them, confusion rising. I am not going anywhere with you, she said, the words coming out stronger than she felt. The man's attention shifted back to her, sharp, immediate. You do not understand, he said, stepping closer again, lowering his voice so only she could hear. That mark is not just a mark. It is a signal. Her pulse quickened. A signal to who? His jaw tightened slightly, as if choosing his words with precision. To every creature in my world that something impossible just happened. Emma let out a short breath, almost a laugh, but it held no humor. Your world? You mean vampires? He did not deny it. Silence stretched for a second too long. Then headlights passed by on the street, and for a brief moment, the light reflected in his eyes again, not gray, not human, but something deeper, older. If you walk away right now, he said slowly, you might have a chance to pretend none of this is real. Emma looked down at her hand again, the mark glowing softly against her skin, undeniable. And if I do not? His expression shifted, something darker, settling beneath the surface, not anger, not threat, but inevitability. Then you are already part of something you cannot leave. The rain intensified, the sound filling the space between them, and yet everything felt too quiet, too focused. Emma's mind raced, every instinct telling her to run, to turn around and disappear into the city, but her feet did not move. Instead, she lifted her gaze to meet his again. What happens to me? She asked. He hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, and that hesitation said more than any answer could. That depends, he said finally, on whether I can protect you. The words settled heavy in the air. Protect her from what? From who? Emma swallowed. And if you cannot? This time, he did not soften. His voice did not look away. Then others will come, and they will not ask questions the way I do. Something cold ran through her chest, sharper than the rain, sharper than fear. Why? She pressed, her voice barely steady. Why me? He exhaled slowly, as if the answer itself was something he did not want to face. Because out of everyone in this city, you were the one who touched me and lived without consequence. Emma blinked, her thoughts stumbling over his words. Without consequence. His eyes flickered once more to the glowing mark. Until now, the nearest figure shifted slightly, tension breaking through their composed stance. My king, we need to move. Emma noticed it then. The way they watched her, not with hostility, but with something closer to calculation, like she had become something valuable, without understanding why. The man stepped closer one final time. Close enough that she could feel the cold radiating from him. Close enough that the world beyond him seemed to disappear. Listen carefully, he said, his voice low but absolute. From this moment on, every second matters. Emma's breath caught. Because whatever that mark is, he continued, it just made you the most important human in a world you were never meant to see. Emma Carter did not move. The rain kept falling. The city kept breathing around her, but everything inside her narrowed to one impossible truth. She could not go back. Her fingers curled slightly as the golden mark pulsed again, brighter now, as if responding to the tension in the air. I did not ask for this, she said, her voice shaking despite her effort to stay steady. The man in front of her watched her carefully, as though every word she spoke mattered more than it should. No one ever does, he replied, his tone softer but still edged with something unbreakable. Behind him, one of the figures shifted again, glancing down the street. We are running out of time. Emma's eyes snapped toward the sound. Time for what? The man did not look away from her, for them to notice. The words settled heavy, and something in the way he said them made her chest tighten. You said this is a signal, she pressed. Who is listening? He hesitated again, and that hesitation confirmed what she feared. Everyone who understands what that mark means, he said. Emma let out a breath she did not realize she was holding. And what does it mean? His gaze dropped briefly to her hand. the glow now unmistakable even under the dim streetlight. It means you are bound to me in a way that should not be possible. Her heart skipped. Bound? I do not even know you. That is exactly why this is a problem, he replied. The rain softened for a moment, like the storm itself was listening. Emma shook her head, trying to make sense of something that refused to be understood. So what? I just walk into your world now and pretend this is normal. His expression darkened slightly, not with anger, but with certainty. There is nothing normal about what just happened. She laughed once, sharp and breathless. That is the first honest thing you have said. He stepped closer again, slower this time, giving her the chance to pull away, but she did not. If you stay here, he said, you will not survive what comes next. Emma's jaw tightened. You keep saying things like that without explaining anything. Because explanation will not change the outcome, he answered. The nearest figure took another step forward, more urgent now. My king. Emma turned toward them, frustration breaking through her fear. Stop calling him that, like it is supposed to make sense to me. Silence followed, heavy and charged. Then she looked back at him, really looked this time, at the way he stood completely still while everything else moved, at the way the rain seemed to avoid lingering on him, at the way his eyes held something far older than the city around them. What is your name? She asked quietly. For a moment, he said nothing, as if the question itself carried weight. Then, Lucien, he answered. The name felt unfamiliar and yet strangely fitting, like it belonged to another time. Emma nodded once, grounding herself in something simple, something human. I am Emma. His gaze softened just slightly at that, the smallest shift, but it was there. Emma, he repeated, as if committing it to memory. Another pulse of light flared across her hand, stronger this time, and both of them looked down at it simultaneously. The pattern had grown, more intricate, more defined, lines weaving together like something ancient waking up. Lucien's expression tightened, not with fear, but with realization. It is accelerating. He murmured. Emma's breath caught. What does that mean? He lifted his eyes back to hers, and for the first time, there was urgency beneath his control. It means we no longer have a choice. Before she could respond, the streetlights flickered once, twice, and then steadied again. The figures around them straightened instantly, their attention shifting outward. Emma felt it then, not a sound, not a sight, but a change in the air, like something unseen had just entered the edges of the moment. Lucien's voice dropped lower, sharper. They felt it. Her heart began to race. Who? He did not answer directly, instead stepping closer, close enough that his presence blocked out everything else. If you trust me, even a little, you need to come with me now. Emma hesitated, her mind pulling in two directions, run or stay, fear or something she could not name. The mark on her hand pulsed again, almost like an answer. She looked down at it, then back at him. And if I do this, she said, slowly, there is no going back, is there? Lucien held her gaze, unwavering. No. The rain began to fall harder again, louder, as if urging her forward. Emma closed her eyes for a brief second, then opened them, her decision settling into place. Then tell me one thing, she said, her voice steady now despite everything. Why me? Lucien did not hesitate this time. Because out of all the souls in this city, he said quietly, you were the only one who saw me as human first. The words hit deeper than she expected, and before she could question it, before she could second-guess herself, he reached out his hand, not touching her yet, but offering. Come with me, Emma, he said, before the world we are standing in disappears behind you forever. Emma Carter stared at his outstretched hand as the rain drummed harder against the pavement, louder now, almost urgent, as if the night itself was pushing her toward a decision she could not undo. Her breath came shallow, uneven, her mind racing through everything she was about to lose and everything she did not understand. $20, a broken apartment, a life that had been falling apart long before this moment. And yet stepping forward felt like stepping off the edge of something far greater. The golden mark on her hand pulsed again, stronger, warmer, and this time it did not feel foreign. It felt like it was calling her forward. She looked up at Lucien, at the calm certainty in his expression, at the way he stood completely still while everything else in the world seemed to move around him. "If I take your hand," she said slowly, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "I am trusting you with everything." Lucien did not hesitate, did not look away. I know, something in the way he said it made her chest tighten, not with fear, but with something deeper, something that felt dangerously close to belief. Behind him, the figures had gone rigid, their attention no longer on her, but outward, scanning the edges of the street as if something unseen was closing in. The air shifted again, colder this time, heavier, and Emma felt it even without understanding what it was. "They are getting closer," one of them said quietly. Emma's heart skipped. "You keep saying that like I am supposed to know what that means." Lucien's eyes flickered briefly toward the street, then back to her, sharper now, more urgent. "It means we are out of time." The word snapped something inside her into place. She exhaled slowly, then reached forward. Her fingers brushed his hand, and this time the cold did not shock her. Instead, the moment their skin met, the mark on her hand flared with light, brighter than before, the golden lines expanding, weaving together like something awakening fully for the first time. Lucien's breath stilled, his grip tightening just slightly, not enough to hurt, but enough to anchor her. The world seemed to tilt for a second, the sound of the rain fading into the background as a strange stillness wrapped around them. Emma's eyes widened. "What is happening?" Lucien did not answer immediately, his gaze locked onto their joined hands. "The bond is stabilizing." The word echoed in her mind. Bond, stronger now, more real, more dangerous. Stabilizing into what, she asked. His eyes lifted to hers, and whatever he saw there made something shift in his expression again. Something almost protective, into something they will not ignore. A sudden flicker of movement at the far end of the street caught Emma's attention. Shadows where there should not have been any, shapes that did not quite match the light. She blinked, trying to focus, but they were gone just as quickly as they appeared. "Did you see that?" she whispered. Lucien's jaw tightened. "Yes." One of the figures stepped closer, his voice low, controlled. "We need to leave now." Emma felt the tension ripple through them, the controlled calm beginning to crack just enough to reveal urgency beneath it. She looked back at Lucien, her grip on his hand tightening without thinking. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere you will be safe," he said. She almost laughed, but it came out as a breath instead. "You keep saying that like safe still exists for me." His expression did not change, but his voice softened, just slightly. "It does, as long as you stay with me." The words settled into her chest, heavy and grounding at the same time. Another pulse of light ran through the mark, and this time it did not stop at her hand. It traveled up her wrist, faint but unmistakable, like a thread connecting her to something beyond herself. Emma inhaled sharply. Lucien. He felt it too. She could see it in the way his posture shifted, in the way his eyes darkened with something deeper than concern. "I know." The streetlights flickered again, longer this time, casting the world into brief shadows before returning. The figures around them moved instantly, forming a subtle barrier without making it obvious. Emma's pulse raced, every instinct telling her that whatever was coming was already too close. Lucien stepped forward, guiding her gently but firmly toward the waiting vehicle, his hand never leaving hers. "Stay close to me," he said quietly. Emma nodded, not trusting her voice, her focus narrowing to his presence, to the steady certainty in the way he moved, to the only thing in this moment that felt real. As they reached the car, she glanced back one last time at the street she had been standing on just minutes ago, the life she had been clinging to, and it already felt distant, like something fading behind her. The door opened silently, and Lucien paused just long enough to look at her again, his expression unreadable but intense. "Once we leave," he said, "there is no pretending this is not real." Emma met his gaze, the mark on her hand glowing faintly between them. "It already is." For a brief second, something like approval flickered in his eyes. Then, he guided her inside, the door closing softly behind them, sealing her into a world she had never meant to enter. And as the car began to move, Emma realized the city outside no longer felt like home. It felt like something she had just escaped from. The car door sealed with a quiet click, and just like that, Emma Carter felt the outside world disappear. The sound of the rain dulled to a distant murmur, replaced by a silence so controlled it felt unnatural, like stepping into a space where chaos was not allowed to exist. She sat frozen for a second, her hand still in Lucien's, the faint glow between their skin now softer but constant, like a reminder that nothing about this moment could be undone. The interior of the vehicle was dim, sleek, every surface polished and precise, and yet none of it felt comforting. It felt like entering a place designed for control, not warmth. Emma slowly pulled her hand back, not out of fear, but because she needed to breathe, to think, to understand where she had just placed herself. The mark did not fade when their hands separated. It remained, glowing faintly against her skin. "So this is it," she said quietly, glancing toward the tinted window as the city lights blurred past. "I just leave everything behind without even knowing what I am stepping into." Lucien sat across from her, his posture composed, his gaze steady. But there was something different now, something less distant, as if the moment they had shared outside had shifted something he could not fully hide. "You were already leaving," he said. Emma let out a soft breath, almost a laugh. "That is not the same thing." He did not argue. Instead, his eyes moved briefly to her hand again, to the mark that had changed. "Everything, how does it feel?" he asked. She looked down, flexing her fingers slightly, expecting pain, heat, something overwhelming, but instead it was steady, present, but not painful. "It feels like it belongs there," she admitted, her voice quieter now. Lucien's expression tightened almost imperceptibly, as if that answer carried weight. "That should not be possible," he said. Emma looked up at him, frustration rising again. "You keep saying that like I am supposed to understand the rules of your world." "You are not," he replied, "and that is exactly why. This is dangerous." The car moved smoothly through the streets, turning corners with precision, the outside world becoming less familiar with every passing second. Emma noticed it then, the subtle shift, the way the buildings grew older, quieter, the lights fewer, the atmosphere heavier. "Where are we going?" she asked again. "Somewhere private," Lucien answered. She crossed her arms slightly, grounding herself. "That is not an answer." He held her gaze for a moment, then said, "Somewhere no. One will reach you without my permission." The words should have felt reassuring, but instead they carried a different weight, one that made her chest tighten. "And if I want to leave?" she asked. Lucien did not respond immediately, and that silence told her everything. Emma nodded slowly, looking away. "Right." The mark pulsed again, drawing her attention back, and this time the glow was accompanied by a faint warmth that traveled up her wrist. She inhaled sharply. "It is changing again." Lucien leaned forward slightly, his focus sharpening. "Show me." She hesitated for a fraction of a second, then extended her hand. His fingers hovered just above her skin, not touching, but close enough that she could feel the cold radiating from him again. The contrast between his presence and the warmth of the mark sent a strange sensation through her. Not fear, not pain, but awareness. "It is adapting," he murmured. "To what?" she asked. His eyes flickered up to hers. "To me." The answer settled between them, heavier than anything else he had said. Emma pulled her hand back slightly, her pulse quickening. "So what? This thing is connecting me to you?" "Yes," he said simply. She shook her head, trying to process it. "That is not normal." "Nothing about you is normal anymore," he replied. The words should have terrified her, but instead they sparked something else, something she could not name. The car slowed, then turned through a set of iron gates that opened without a sound. Emma's attention snapped to the window as the city disappeared completely, replaced by something darker, quieter, older. A long driveway stretched ahead, lined with trees that seemed to block out the rest of the world, their branches forming a canopy that swallowed the light. In the distance, a structure emerged, massive, elegant, and impossibly still, like it had been waiting long before she ever existed. Emma's breath caught. "This is where you live." Lucien followed her gaze, his expression unreadable. "This is where I exist." The difference in his words did not escape her. The car came to a smooth stop, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Emma looked down at her hand one more time, the golden mark glowing softly, steady now, as if it had found its place. She looked back at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "And what exactly did I just walk into?" Lucien met her gaze, something ancient and certain behind his eyes. A world that does not let go once it chooses you. The car engine went silent, and for a moment, Emma Carter did not move. The world outside the window felt distant, unreal, like something she had already left behind. The gates had closed, the long road behind them swallowed by darkness, and the structure ahead stood still and waiting, its tall windows glowing faintly against the night like eyes that had been watching long before she arrived. Her fingers tightened slightly in her lap as the golden mark pulsed again, slower now, steadier, almost calm, as if it recognized where she was. "We are here," Lucian said quietly, though he had not needed to speak for her to understand. Emma exhaled slowly, her breath fogging faintly against the glass before fading. "This does not feel real." "It is," he replied, opening the door with a smooth, controlled motion. Cool air slipped inside, carrying a different kind of silence, deeper, older, untouched by the noise of the city. Emma hesitated for half a second, then stepped out, the ground beneath. Her feet was solid, polished stone, the sound of her shoes echoing softly in the stillness. She looked around, taking in the scale of it all, the height of the structure, the precision of every detail, the way everything seemed too perfect, too untouched by time. "How long has this place been here?" she asked. Lucian stepped beside her, his presence steady. "Long enough that it no longer belongs to time the way your world does." The answer did not comfort her. If anything, it made everything feel heavier. The large doors at the entrance opened before they reached them, silent, automatic, as if the house itself recognized him. Emma slowed her steps instinctively, her eyes widening slightly as she crossed the threshold. Inside, the air changed completely. It was cooler, still, carrying a faint scent she could not name, something ancient but not unpleasant. The space was vast, the ceilings high, the floors reflecting soft light from chandeliers that hung like frozen constellations. Everything was elegant, controlled, and yet there was no warmth to it, no sign of life as she understood it. "Do you live here alone?" she asked, her voice echoing slightly. "No," Lucian answered, "but you will not see everyone." That did not make her feel better. Her gaze moved across the room, taking in the details, the shadows that seemed just a little too deep, the quiet that felt like it was listening. The mark on her hand pulsed again, and this time she felt it clearly, a faint pull, like a thread guiding her attention somewhere deeper within the house. She frowned, glancing down. "It is doing that again." Lucian noticed immediately, his focus sharpening. "What do you feel?" Emma hesitated, searching for the right words. "It is not just warmth anymore. It feels like it is pulling me somewhere." His expression shifted, subtle but unmistakable. "That is not supposed to happen this quickly." "You keep saying that," she replied, frustration creeping back in. "And it is not helping." Lucian stepped closer, lowering his voice slightly. "It means the connection between us is strengthening faster than it should." Emma met his gaze, something in her chest tightening again. "And what happens when it finishes?" For a moment, he said nothing. "Then, we find out what it wants from us." The answer was not what she expected. The lights above flickered once, softly, like a breath passing through the room, and Emma felt it again, that subtle shift in the air, the same one from outside, but closer now. She turned her head slightly, her instincts catching something before her mind could explain it. "We are not alone," she said quietly. Lucian's posture changed instantly, not visibly tense, but more focused, more aware. "No," he said, his voice calm, but firm. "We are not." Footsteps echoed faintly from somewhere beyond the main hall, slow, measured, deliberate. Emma's heart began to race, but she forced herself to stay still, to not show the fear rising in her chest. The mark on her hand flared again, brighter than before, and this time it felt different, not just a connection, but a reaction. Lucian noticed it. At the same moment, his eyes narrowing slightly. "They can feel it." Emma swallowed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Feel what?" He looked at her, his expression unreadable but intense. "You." The footsteps grew closer, the sound echoing through the vast space, and Emma realized something she had not fully understood until now. Stepping into this world had not just changed her life, it had revealed her to it. She straightened slightly, her fear still there, but no longer controlling her. "And lifted her gaze toward the direction of the sound. "Then I guess they are about to meet me," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Lucien studied her for a brief second, something almost like approval flickering in his eyes. "Stay beside me." Emma nodded once, the golden mark glowing softly as the presence in the room grew stronger, and for the first time since stepping through those gates, she understood one thing clearly. Whatever this bond was, whatever it meant, it had already begun to change not just her life, but the world around her. The footsteps did not rush. They approached with calm precision, each step echoing softly against the marble floor as if whoever was coming had no reason to hurry. Emma Carter felt her pulse climb anyway, her senses sharpening in a way she had never experienced before, every sound clearer, every shift in the air more noticeable, and at the center of it all, the mark on her hand pulsed steadily, almost expectant. She stood beside Lucien, close enough to feel the cold stillness of his presence, anchoring her, and for the first time since everything began, she did not step away from it. The figure emerged from the shadows at the far end of the hall, tall, composed, dressed in dark formal clothing that seemed to absorb the light around it. His movements were smooth, controlled, but there was something in the way he carried himself that made the space feel smaller, heavier. He stopped several feet away, his gaze moving first to Lucien, then to Emma, and lingering there just a moment, longer than necessary. "So it is true," he said quietly, his voice measured, almost thoughtful. Emma resisted the instinct to look away, even as the weight of his attention settled on her. Lucien's voice cut through the silence, calm but firm. "You were not summoned." The man's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. "When something impossible happens, it does not require an invitation." Emma felt the mark on her hand flare again, brighter this time, reacting to the tension between them. The man's eyes flickered down to it instantly, and for the first time, something like genuine surprise crossed his expression. "Fascinating," he murmured. Emma shifted her weight slightly, grounding herself. "Do you mind explaining why everyone keeps looking at me like that?" The man's gaze lifted back to hers, sharp, assessing. "Because you are not supposed to exist in this context." She let out a breath, frustration breaking through her unease. "That is becoming a pattern tonight." Lucien stepped slightly in front of her, not blocking her, but positioning himself between her and the man in a way that was subtle yet unmistakable. "You have seen enough," he said. The man tilted his head slightly, studying him. "Have I?" The air in the room seemed to tighten again, the silence stretching thinner, sharper. Emma felt it clearly now, the invisible tension threading through the space, and the mark responded, pulsing faster, as if it were aware of the attention focused on it. She looked down briefly, then back up, refusing to shrink from it. "If you are here to stare at my hand," she said, her voice steadier than she expected, "you are doing a great job, but I would really appreciate an explanation." The man's gaze returned to her, and this time, there was something different there, not just curiosity, but interest. "You speak directly," he noted. Emma lifted her chin slightly. "Someone has to." Lucien's eyes flickered toward her for a brief second, something unreadable passing through his expression, then returned to the man. "Leave," he said. The word was quiet, but it carried weight. The man held his gaze for a moment longer, then exhaled softly, almost amused. "Very well." His attention shifted back to Emma one last time, his eyes lingering on the glowing mark. "You may not understand what you have become yet," he said, "but others will." Emma felt a chill run through her, not from fear, but from the certainty in his tone. "That sounds like a problem," she replied. The man's lips curved again, faintly. "It is not your problem alone." With that, he turned, his steps just as measured as before, and disappeared back into the shadows as if he had never been there at all. The silence that followed felt heavier than before, as if the room itself was holding its breath. Emma exhaled slowly, her shoulders relaxing just slightly. "I am starting to think your world has a habit of being vague on purpose." Lucien did not respond immediately. His gaze remained fixed on the direction the man had disappeared, his expression more guarded now, more calculating. "That was not a coincidence," he said finally. Emma frowned. "What was not?" He turned back to her, his eyes steady but darker now. "His timing." The mark on her hand pulsed again, slower this time, but deeper, like something settling into place. Emma looked down at it, then back up at him. So what happens now? Lucian studied her for a moment, as if weighing something unspoken, then said, Now we find out why you matter more than you should. The words lingered between them, heavy and unresolved, and for the first time, Emma realized something she had not fully grasped before. This was not just about her entering his world. It was about that world beginning to shift around her. The silence did not return to normal after the man left. It lingered, heavier, as if his presence had left something behind that the walls themselves had not yet released. Emma Carter exhaled slowly, her gaze still fixed on the shadows where he had disappeared, her mind trying to catch up with everything that had just happened. You were not surprised to see him, she said quietly, turning her attention back to Lucian. He did not answer immediately, his expression still distant, calculating, as if he was tracing possibilities she could not see. I was hoping he would not arrive this soon, he said finally. Emma frowned slightly. Soon? You make it sound like more are coming. Lucian met her gaze, and the weight in his eyes made her chest tighten. They will. The words settled into the room like a quiet warning. Emma crossed her arms lightly, grounding herself again. Then maybe it is time you stop explaining things in pieces and actually tell me what I am dealing with. For a moment, Lucian said nothing. Then he stepped closer, not invading her space, but closing the distance enough that his voice did not have to carry. Across the hall, what you saw tonight was someone from the council, he said. Emma blinked. Council? A governing body, he continued. One that does not tolerate unpredictability. She let out a breath, shaking her head slightly. And I am the unpredictable part. Yes, he said simply. The honesty in his tone left no room for doubt. Emma glanced down at her hand again, the golden mark now glowing faintly but steadily, like it had settled into a rhythm of its own. Then explain this, she said, lifting her hand slightly. Because everyone seems to understand it except me. Lucian's gaze followed the movement, his focus sharpening again. It is a bond. She looked back at him, unimpressed. You already said that. Not like this, he replied. Emma waited, her patience thinning but her curiosity stronger. Lucian took a breath, slow and measured, as if choosing his words carefully. In our world, bonds like this are not formed by accident. They are ancient, deliberate, and extremely rare. Emma's pulse quickened. So what? I am just lucky. His expression did not change. No, you are impossible. The words hit harder than she expected. Emma let out a quiet laugh, but it did not reach her eyes. You keep using that word like it is supposed to help. It is not meant to help, he said. It is meant to be accurate. She looked at him for a long second, searching for something that would make sense of all this, something human she could hold on to. And this bond, she said slowly, what does it do? Lucian's gaze held hers, steady and unwavering. It connects us. Emma shook her head slightly. That is still not an explanation. It means your life and mine are no longer separate in the way they were before, he clarified. The air between them seemed to shift again, not from tension this time, but from something quieter, more intimate, though no less intense. Emma's breath caught slightly. That sounds like something I should have agreed to. Lucian's voice softened just enough to matter. It is not something either of us chose. The mark pulsed again, and this time Emma felt it clearly, not just warmth, but a faint echo, like a distant awareness that was not entirely her own. She stilled, her eyes narrowing slightly. Did you feel that? Lucian's expression changed instantly. What did you feel? Emma hesitated, trying to describe something that did not have words. It was like something moved. Not here. She gestured lightly to her chest. But somewhere else, like I could sense something that is not mine. Lucian stepped closer, his attention fully locked on her now. The bond is expanding. Emma swallowed. Expanding into what? He did not answer immediately, and that silence felt heavier than anything he had said so far. Lucian, she pressed. He exhaled slowly. Into awareness. The word lingered. Emma's heart began to race again. Awareness of what? Before he could answer, the lights above flickered again, sharper this time, and the air shifted once more, colder, more focused. Emma felt it instantly, that same presence from before, but stronger now, closer. The mark on her hand flared in response, brighter than it had been before, and this time the warmth spread further, tracing faint lines up her wrist again. She inhaled sharply. They are here again. Lucien's posture changed, more alert now, more guarded. Yes. Emma's gaze moved toward the entrance of the hall, her instincts pulling her attention forward. She could not see them yet, but she could feel them, multiple presences this time, each one distinct, each one aware. Her pulse pounded in her ears, but she did not step back. Instead, she stood straighter, the fear still there but no longer controlling her. You said this bond connects us, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Then tell me the truth. Lucien looked at her, something unreadable in his expression, something that almost looked like hesitation. Am I in danger? For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. Then he answered, his voice low and certain. Yes. Emma nodded once, absorbing it, accepting it faster than she expected. And you? She asked. His gaze did not waver. So am I. The footsteps began to echo again, more than one set this time. And Emma realized that whatever had started between them was no longer contained to just the two of them. It had drawn attention, and now that attention was arriving. The footsteps did not stop this time. They entered the hall without hesitation, measured, controlled, and unmistakably deliberate. And Emma Carter felt the shift immediately, not just in the air, but inside herself. The golden mark on her hand flared brighter than ever before, the light no longer subtle, no longer contained, as if it recognized something approaching that demanded its full presence. She inhaled sharply, her pulse racing, but she did not step back. She stood beside Lucien, closer now, her instincts pulling her toward him instead of away. 3 figures emerged from the shadows, each one carrying the same unnatural stillness, the same quiet authority that made the space feel smaller, heavier, like the room itself was adjusting to them. They stopped several feet away, their attention locking onto Emma. Immediately, not with confusion, not with doubt, but with certainty. So it is confirmed, one of them said, his voice calm, almost clinical. Emma felt the words settle against her skin, and the mark responded again, pulsing in steady, undeniable rhythm. Lucien's voice cut through the moment, colder now, sharper. You were not granted access to this estate. The figure in the center tilted his head slightly, his gaze never leaving Emma. When something threatens the balance, permission becomes irrelevant. Emma's jaw tightened slightly, the words echoing in her mind. Threatens the balance. She let out a slow breath, forcing her voice to stay steady. I am standing right here, and I still do not know what I am supposed to be threatening. The figure's eyes shifted to her, and for the first time, there was something almost like acknowledgement in his expression. You are not a threat by choice. Emma crossed her arms lightly, grounding herself. That is reassuring. Lucien stepped slightly forward, his presence firm, unyielding. You have seen enough. Leave. The other 2 figures exchanged a brief glance, subtle but telling, before returning their attention to Emma. We will leave, the central figure said. But not before we understand what we are looking at. Emma felt the mark pulse again, stronger this time, and without thinking, she lifted her hand slightly, the golden pattern glowing clearly in the dim light. The reaction was immediate. All 3 of them focused on it, their composed expressions tightening just enough to reveal something deeper, something closer to recognition. That is not possible, one of them murmured. Emma let out a short breath, almost amused despite everything. You are all starting to sound the same. Lucien's gaze flickered briefly toward her, something like approval passing through it before returning to the others. It is not a matter for the council, he said, his voice steady but absolute. The central figure finally shifted his attention to Lucien. Everything that alters the structure of our world is a matter for the council. The words hung in the air, heavy, unyielding. Emma felt the tension tighten again, but this time, something inside her did not shrink from it. Instead, the mark on her hand pulsed again, and she felt it clearly, that strange awareness expanding, not just outward, but inward, like something connecting pieces she could not yet see. She took a small step forward, not away from Lucien, but beside him, her voice cutting through the tension before she could second-guess herself. Then maybe you should start explaining instead of just staring. The room went still. Lucien's head turned slightly toward her, his expression unreadable. But there was something there, something that had not been there before. The central figure studied her for a long moment, then said, "You are adapting faster than expected." Emma met his gaze, refusing to look away. "I am trying to keep up." The mark flared again, and this time, something changed. The light did not just glow, it moved, tracing further along her wrist, faint lines extending like a pattern that was still forming. Lucien saw it at the same moment, his expression tightening. "It is progressing." The figures noticed it as well, their attention sharpening instantly. "If it completes," one of them said quietly, "the consequences will not be limited to her." Emma's breath caught, her gaze snapping to Lucien. "What does that mean?" For a moment he said nothing. Then his voice lowered, more controlled than before, but heavier. "It means this bond may change more than just us." The words settled into her chest, deep and unavoidable. Emma looked down at her hand again, the golden light steady, alive, undeniable. Then she lifted her gaze back to the figures in front of her, then to Lucien beside her, and something inside her shifted, not fear, not hesitation, but resolve. "Then maybe it is time we stop treating this like a mistake," she said, quietly, "and start figuring out what it actually is." The room fell silent again, but this time it felt different, not just tense, but uncertain. Lucien studied her for a long moment, something deeper moving behind his eyes, something ancient and unfamiliar. Then, slowly, he spoke, his voice quiet but certain. "That may be the most dangerous decision you could make." Emma held his gaze, the mark on her hand glowing softly between them. "Then I guess it is already too late to turn back."